Remedy Entertainment has kind of leveled up recently. As of this moment, they're working on the Max Payne remakes, a sequel to Control, a multiplayer spin-off of Control, and a free-to-play co-op shooter. That's a lot of stuff to be in development all at once. They seem to have finally burst out of the bubble they were in for so long as a studio that was making recognizable and beloved titles while still not actually selling all that well with Control, a game that got a lot of Game of the Year nominations in 2019 and sold millions of copies in its first year, apparently being the fastest growing IP for Remedy since Max Payne, which I kinda don't get because if you look at the numbers, it seems like Control far outsold Max Payne 1 in its early stages, but public records of sales are a little bit weird sometimes. Ooh, I wonder if that's foreshadowing to later in the video. Control was a massive success for Remedy after the disappointing performances of Max Payne 2, the only other Max Payne game developed by Remedy, and Alan Wake, despite both games being pretty well received, and with that success came a push from Remedy to reintroduce those franchises to modern audiences. While we will be getting remakes of the original 2 Max Payne games though, and a full sequel on top of the already remastered Alan Wake as well, there's another major Remedy franchise that hasn't had any acknowledgement from the studio in recent years. One that was meant to be their big break into the mainstream, that was supposed to be as important to Xbox as Gears of War and Halo, that was trying to shake up the entire medium and was left dangling in order to be continued with a sequel and possibly many more installments after that, only to be quickly swept under the rug on release, with Xbox representatives doing a total 180 on their messaging around it. It wasn't a bad game, but its many ambitions fell a little bit flat and it didn't capture an audience like many believed it would have. What is that game, you ask? I don't know why you would ask, and I don't know why the picture is blurred, because, I mean, you read the title, you're not stupid, it's Quantum Break. Let's talk about Quantum Break. I want to start by talking about the actual game portion of this video game, and if you haven't played it and you're thinking, that's a weird thing to say, isn't the game portion of the game just the whole thing? Then oh my sweet summer child, you have no idea what you're in for. Like most of Remedy's games, Quantum Break revolves around a unique power set, in this case time powers, and the arsenal at your disposal is pretty stellar for this concept. You're able to perform quick dashes, longer rushes with your enemies frozen in time fields that suspend your enemies in place and make them an easy target, time shields like Neo, and time explosions. I don't know what explosions have to do with time, but it's fun to use, so I won't question it. The power side of firefights is pretty great, and there's situations where using your abilities correctly can take an encounter from frustrating to fun, like quickly thinning out the herd, then using the shield to have a couple of seconds to spray some lead into the more troublesome enemies, and then dashing to get a better vantage point to avoid being cornered. And unlike a lot of games that give you these game-changing abilities, I felt like I actually needed to use everything I had access to pretty regularly in order to get the most out of the experience instead of just relying on a move or two, especially on hard difficulty. It helps that certain enemy types are also able to dash around and flank you. It really pulls you out of a spot that you might be getting too comfortable with and forces you to move around more than most cover-based shooters do. In a lot of games with a cover system, you move forwards uniformly like this because for the most part enemies are rushing over to you head on, and even if they move in from the sides, all you need to do is target them first, and for the most part you can keep enemies ahead of you at all times. The best games usually send people out from different points and give you a bigger area to play with so you can change positions every once in a while, and the worst games make the opposing forces so brain dead that you can just clear out massive rooms while staying behind the same box the whole time. Quantum Break though can send an enemy from here to here in a flash, which puts the pressure on you to move all of a sudden. You may try to dash to create separation while using the temporary slowdown time associated while dashing to take the enemy out, but then you're here with the dash on cooldown and surrounded, so maybe you set up a shield in this direction and use it to focus on this enemy without being shot in the back. These systems really help the game feel more exciting through more than just giving you cool powers. There is a level of wonkiness and stiffness associated with the gameplay though. The character you control feels kind of heavy, and the animations when you come out of a dash, for example, are a nice addition in theory, but they make the movement feel more clunky and disorganized rather than smooth. And then there are more extreme moments, like aiming after a speed rush. I promise on my controller the movements I was trying to accomplish make sense. I ran and then tried to turn and aim at something, but the camera was sent flying in all sorts of directions, and it happened every time I tried to pull off a similar move. Outside of movement, I also have a bone to pick with the general usefulness of cover, because it's not only the annoying proximity type system where you take cover by being close to something, which is especially irritating with long, thin pillars and the like, but so much worse is the fact that you can straight up be shot very easily when you're behind objects, your oversized heads just sticking out from behind these things, and there were so many times where I was killed because Jack just couldn't be bothered to duck down half a centimeter more. The game also suffers from late game bullet spongy syndrome. Watch me shoot 100 bullets, 19 rockets in the entire state of Nevada at this guy and he just walks it off. And by far the most annoying thing about the combat is the unbelievable amount of recoil and spread that these weapons have. It's so exaggerated, it makes Jack seem like he's a sentient cheese string the way that his arms can barely hang onto the weapon he's firing. My 2-year-old niece could keep a gun under control better than this. Wait, I don't have a 2-year-old niece. Who's this child sitting in my basement? Ah, geez, it was a prank. The last thing I want to touch on with the combat is the fact that there's no dedicated melee button. You can't melee enemies unless you rush at them first, which is an ability that's on cooldown and only given to you after about like 40% into the game. And that kind of made for some awkward moments where I'd just be right in front of someone and have to pull up my gun instead of giving them the old 1-2, or I'd rush at them with the intention of pulling off a melee at the end, but I'd run out of juice too early and just jog past him while spamming B. Okay, just hold on, just wait 1 second. This move is really cool if I can pull it off, but I just got, hey, whoa, hold your horses, buddy, alright? Just let this come back. Alright, and there we go. I didn't wait long enough, can you believe that? I should have let the whole thing come back. You know, you were just doing your own thing and ow, God! Damn it! The gameplay of Quantum Break has its issues, and it's not the smoothest experience, but it's got some fun firefights occasionally, and great powers would still make it enjoyable regardless. The story, on the other hand, is much messier and less interesting than it had the potential to be as a result of convoluted plot lines, unnecessary characters, MacGuffins, and a general feeling of being overstuffed. Time travel is a notoriously difficult thing to write about. Dean Pelton, author of Time Desk, has been very vocal about this issue.
Time travel is really hard to write about!
But Quantum Break seems to throw a lot of extra explanations and ideas into the mix, which adds to the complexity of the narrative without adding a lot of substance. 9 to 10 hours simply isn't long enough to tell this huge story with multiple major characters, big choices, and chronon particles and regulators and syndromes. Chronon is to this game what Quantum is to the MCU, which is kind of ironic if you think about it. The game does its best to show all sides of its conflict equally, which means we get a lot of scenes with people who work at the evil corporation who are either evil themselves or betraying the company or ratting each other out. On one hand, it's interesting because it operates less like most games do, which simply follow the story of whatever protagonist is currently at hand, and instead follows a structure more similar to a movie or TV show where you kind of hop around and see what everyone involved in the plot is doing. But on the other hand, doing this stretches out the narrative even further. The focus is just too split for the amount of time they allocate to each individual character or section. The story also starts like immediately. The major conflict and mad scramble to fix it starts at minute 1 and goes until minute 600, and while I don't mind a good old-fashioned fast-paced opening, the lack of any real downtime means there's no chance to get to like these characters. I feel no attachment to anyone in this game. I don't know most of their backstories. I don't know what kind of people they were outside of boilerplate personality types. I was just watching a bunch of random people doing things on screen. I think there was exactly one time where I felt an emotion in this game, and it was when somebody was trapped in time for like 12 years, and I was more sad about the concept than anything else. As far as portraying multiple perspectives though, I think the biggest misstep was attaching most of the major choices to the villain Paul Serene, aka Discount Harrison Wells. The first time we make a decision with this character, we've just seen him kill our brother and show no indications of being a good guy, and the game's like, here, figure out what he does next. Like, what? What do you mean? All of the big decisions you make in this game are whether Paul trusts one person over the other, whether he prioritizes his company or his ultimate goals, and it's so confusing because, like, he's the villain? Why am I making his decisions? The game is asking, hey, what's the right choice for him to make here? Should he let this be a PR disaster to focus on capturing Jack, or should he try and save face with the public? And I'm sitting here thinking, why do I care? Oh no, the villain's gonna have a fallout with the media. This isn't a life simulator for this character. Shouldn't I be doing everything in my power to sabotage this dude? Why would I make savvy business decisions? The game doesn't present this like a way to screw him over. It presents it like, hey, what's the thing you would do in this scenario? And the answer is just, I don't know, not be a psychopath probably. So why am I deciding if he should give a speech or leave it to his right-hand man? It's so odd and confusing as a concept. I truly don't know what the purpose of this is, especially because, get this, it doesn't actually change the outcome of anything. It alters the details of scenes and certain boring characters' fates, but the ending is the same no matter what, and that means the game is left with the downsides of choices in video games, aka a less tight script, and has none of the upsides like, you know, effect. Anyways, that about covers most of my major thoughts on the game of Quantum Break, though I have a couple more miscellaneous topics I wanted to touch on. I've never liked massive narrative dumps presented in letters and emails and codex entries, and I don't like them here. I literally just click on them to know that I clicked on them, and then I wouldn't read read a single word because this is the laziest way to flesh out your world, and it's not even packaged in a cool atmospheric way. The puzzles, which usually require some kind of time manipulation, are cool visually but not very engaging practically. It usually comes down to reverse time, okay, now go, or at its most complicated, reverse time, now go, now wait for a second for time to move forward, now go again. It's more of a nice flourish than a substantial mechanic. The visuals are honestly some of the best you're gonna find from the Xbox One generation, but there are some weird moments like see-through hair and, like I mentioned earlier, a sort of stiff feeling to everything. They clearly pulled out all the stops to make this game look great, but the cracks do show here and there. The ending is pretty weird and confusing, and the final boss is awful. I hated him. On hard difficulty, this is just an unreasonable difficulty spike, which had you fighting enemies that absorb bullets like SpongeBob absorbs punches and being constantly followed by an instant kill grenade. It just kept spawning where I was standing and I'd have to escape its range, and then 2 seconds later another one would spawn, taking the idea of being pushed out of cover way too far. Overall though, I did enjoy playing the game even with its issues. Being a freaking time hero sounds cool as hell, and while the freedom and mobility of control would have been nice to have here, it still does a good job of giving you that fantasy. I would have liked if we spent more time with fun gameplay sections though, and less with expository dialogue and setups and boring characters, and thankfully the other half of this experience has even more of that stuff. Wait, did I say thankfully? I meant unfortunately. Yeah, you remember how I said that the game kind of had a TV show structure? That's because one half of it is an actual TV show. Now here's the thing, right? People like the Quantum Break show generally. It's got a good IMDb rating, I've seen people call it well produced, but in my humble opinion, these people are suffering from video game storytelling blindness. Games are automatically given a much bigger pass when it comes to their stories. There are so many that I've seen described as these groundbreaking, unbelievable pieces of storytelling that would be laughed out of the room if they were TV shows. And Quantum Break proves that to me because some people think it's awesome because it's a game, but this really feels like a crappy CW show. All of the effects look so much worse than they do in the game, the set design and the way everything's lit feels cheap, the action is awkward and frantic and poorly choreographed, and this is kind of a random point, but it doesn't help that two characters look completely identical, so I was always confused for a second at the beginning. Seriously, how many white men can you have in the same story? I was thinking about how to tackle the show section in this video, and the conclusion that I came to is that I'm just going to turn into a commentary channel for the next few minutes because I need to try and make it clear how ridiculous this thing is. So the show starts off after the main character Jack's brother gets squished, and every episode is interlaced in between segments of the game, focusing on perspectives of characters that aren't Jack, basically a bunch of people who work at the evil corporation Monarch. There was a witness for stuff that went down at the beginning of the game at the university, which was, in essence, some light destruction and death, and I made the choice to use her to frame Jack. Again, I don't know why I do this, aren't I Jack? But I used the logic of, I guess this is what this character would want to make the choice. Now Liam, and again, let me remind you, these are two different characters despite it looking like this guy's just dragging his clone around here. They're even dressed the same, for God's sake. Feels bad about the situation at the university, whereas Hatch, the villain's right-hand man, reassures him that he shouldn't sweat it. This is when we're introduced to the worst character in the whole show, Charlie, with an establishing shot that looks like a stock photo that they just zoomed into, followed by a set that looks like it's for a Lele Pond sketch. I know I'm the last person that should be talking about lighting and sets. I mean, look at this monstrosity, but I'm also an idiot trying to figure out how a camera works. I'm not a fully fledged production with millions of dollars and a sizable staff, so I feel like I can make a little bit of fun of how this looks. Anyways, Charlie is this expert hacker man who's sarcastic and clever and pompous, and I know this because this first scene essentially serves to write those things directly on his forehead. The whole show he's clickety-clacking furiously at random keys, and when it cuts back to the screen it looks like he's just navigating a website normally. And I think it's really funny that he acts very snarky and overconfident, but none of what he's doing ever seems all that cool. Like, they introduce a whole ass character, this guy, so he can sit and be impressed by Charlie finding pictures of somebody to use as blackmail as he explains the process like he's a freaking wizard or something. And this dude's dumbfounded at the awesomeness of finding pictures and emailing them to someone, and then he never shows up again. That was the whole point of his character, to make this character seem impressive. I'm gonna take 9 years to describe this show though if I continue at this pace, so let's speed things up. So Liam goes over to his wife's place to sniff her knee. She talks about how she's a furry.
I dreamt you were a cat with these big furry bear paws.
Then the game says, okay, don't forget about that chick, she's gonna be really important 7 hours from now and not a second in between. Liam finds out that there's a traitor in Monarch, so he's sent out to go hit him with a big stick probably, and then whoa, time stops and it looks bad. We move to Paul Serene, the main bad guy, and Hatch from earlier having a conversation about stopping Jack and finding the traitor that's inside Monarch. And then we get introduced to Fiona, and her and Charlie have some romantic tension. Ooh, why would I care about this? Seriously, think about it. We are in the accompanying TV show portion of the game about time travel, following people who have no link to the main protagonist and work for the evil company. I don't care if one of them's a plant and the other one has a change of heart later. I'm about as invested in this romance as I am in finishing this sentence. So they wrap it up and talk about a party that's happening. Charlie says this.
What are you gonna wear?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll go naked.
So that's something, and Liam goes to find the traitor. Once he finds them though, it turns out, oh no, the worst has happened. It's Beth. Who's Beth?
I really didn't want it to be you.
She has a quick conversation with him and they immediately get caught by other Monarch guys, which leads to the first TV show fight scene, and oh boy, when I tell you these fight scenes are allergic to shots that last longer than 0.2 seconds. These things make the Winter Soldier fight look like the Daredevil prison escape scene with the amount of cuts they have. I was playing this on 2x speed to refresh myself on the details when writing this video, and this is what I saw. Describe one thing that happened there. Liam immediately betrays Monarch because Beth said that the end of time was coming and there's some kind of lifeboat protocol, which she doesn't explain. He's just like, yeah, cool, that sounds fine. Charlie finds out because of the van footage, immediately tells Liam he's onto him, 6 Monarch security on him, and oh boy, another fight scene, and then a car chase, and they catch him. End of episode 1. Episode 2 starts with Serene and Hatch finding out that Jack's found a second time machine that they've been looking for. Remember that the game is taking place in between these, so I'm not recapping the whole story. You decide if you'd rather focus on your big speech or interrogate Jack, who's been caught by Monarch, and we see Serene is sick and this doctor has been helping him combat it. Cut to the party and Fiona is laying it on thick on Charlie. No woman has ever been this into a man before. He should have been immediately suspicious. He brings up that he helped catch a traitor today. She gets crazy eyes. Seriously, dude, get out of there. And then she goes to the bathroom and is sad. This truck has the unique feature of having a mirror placed directly in the middle, apparently. Hatch and the doctor get into a little spat. Liam has a valiant escape attempt.
Hey, you're Crocker, right? Crocker! I really need to take a shit. Come on, Crocker. Come on, Crocker!
And then talks like a 7-year-old who just learned what swearing was.
Listen, this is just a big misfucking understanding.
And surprisingly, he actually gets let out on the count that he needs to
Take a fucking shit.
and escapes easily. He then goes and ambushes Charlie and Fiona's little after-party hang, almost kills Charlie, but then Fiona unveils that she's actually here because of Beth the traitor, and they all turn into a little gang. They find out that, oh no, Chronon bad, there's the harrowing off-screen death of somebody we've never seen before.
It's Dr. Kim.
No, not Dr. Kim. And then Jack gets interrogated. What we learn here is that according to Serene, every attempt at trying to fix the past results in the same events happening regardless, so trying to stop the inevitable destruction of time is pointless. And instead, the best they can do is set up a little safe haven for some people to survive in this little bunker thing. The gang finds the Deus Ex Machina device that can apparently fix everything. They get ambushed again. That's 3 times already for Liam. And then, oh no, what in the Grant Gustin? That's also the second Flash reference I've made in this video, and I'm capping it at 2 because I've heard if you mention it 3 times, Ezra Miller jumps out of a mirror and punches you in the face. Episode 2 ends with their escape, and 3 starts with Serene angry that Jack kidnapped the doctor in the game section in between all of this. He's got trust issues now and is upset with Hatch, but there's also evidence that maybe the doctor betrayed him, so the decision here is who you trust. I don't understand why this is a thing, because according to the game, Serene knows the future and what happens no matter what he does, so why would he not know who's loyal? But who knows, maybe it's explained in one of the 700 email chains that the game has. There were a few times where I looked up questions about why things are the way they are in this game, and a lot of people were citing all the different letters and hidden details to explain it all. That's cool, but like, if the game's gonna explain major parts of its logic through optional, missable, boring means, I have a right to be confused by those things. Anyways, I told Hatch he was being a tool. Beth is outed to Serene. Again, I don't know how he didn't know about her. Never mind, I'm never gonna figure this out. And Charlie has a meeting with Hatch where he essentially agrees to be Hatch's second in command after his planned coup. Charlie meets back up with the gang. He gets throat punched because he sort of abandoned them during the escape, but sneaky guy is calling Hatch during this conversation. There's a really corny explosion. The gang gets chased by water, which politely waits for them as they escape, like nothing's happening anymore. There was a tsunami a second ago, but alright. Liam is ambushed by Monarch again. He presumably dies, except 3 seconds later we learn that he's not, and we get to see Serene finally snap and show off his unbridled rage.
I'm a dead man! You let this happen!
Whoa, careful, don't bring the whole building down now. The lifeboat protocol starts and Liam tries to get his wife to safety, but when he gets there, he's ambushed again. And this time it leads to the best fight in the whole show. His wife thinks he's crazy because he killed that guy while everyone was standing around grabbing their mouths for 3 whole minutes. Nobody said a single word until he grabs her from behind and explains how he stalked her for a year. That seems to calm her down.
So every Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I would walk down the street because it was the only 2 nights at the bartender. She wasn't in school.
Serene asks his men to apprehend Hatch. End of episode 3. Episode 4, the final one. Now this is the only one where I actually went against the general consensus in my decision, but that doesn't change much because again, the ending is the same regardless. Serene has to decide between giving up and trying to maintain control. Clickety clickety clack clack, Charlie gets him and Fiona into the lifeboat even though she just punched him in the face for killing Liam. Fiona gets in contact with Jack for the first time and talks about the Deus Ex Machina device. Charlie decides he actually wants to be a good guy now because Fiona gives him an airtight reason.
But I spoke to him. I spoke to Jack Joyce and he needs it.
Alright, that's as in-depth as we're gonna go, I guess. Another Liam fight scene. His wife is chill with murder now, so it's okay, and Charlie gives a big speech which makes it seem like he's gonna sacrifice himself by helping Jack, which is weird because he didn't die in my playthrough. See, the game mentions how the choices you make will affect the show and the game, and that mainly refers to smaller details like who lives or dies, but it also means that this 2-hour TV show had to have more than 2 hours of content shot for it outside of the stuff that maybe got cut. So not only did the show's quality probably suffer because they had to budget for a 3.5-hour movie, but only 2 hours would actually be shown to the player, but also some scenes feel out of place emotionally or story-wise. Like, this is an I'm gonna sacrifice myself speech that was for me, followed by him meeting Jack in the game and going, alright buddy, good luck, I'm gonna go back and bang Fiona now, so it's kind of just an awkward sequence of events. Anyways, depending on what you pick, different people die and the CFR is available somehow for Jack to find, and then the rest of the story plays out in the game. I found the show a lot more unintentionally funny than I think it was gunning for, and that sucks because so much time was taken by it and it had so many characters that it just muddied the waters of this game in my opinion. There's a lot of characters I don't care about and maybe 2 that I do, and that's not a great ratio. I also got major whiplash going from game to show because all of a sudden I'm watching what's essentially a 30-minute cutscene between a game which also features shorter in-game cutscenes, and I can't help but shake the feeling that this whole thing could have been better if they just ditched this ambitious TV show idea. How did that ambition pay off, by the way?
Don't try to take this from me. Don't try to take this from me.
Because the last 2 sections went on way longer than I thought they would, this one's gonna be really short. I just kinda wanted to discuss how Quantum Break was received. Critically, it's got sort of a mediocre Metacritic score with a 77, and the one-word description for it seems to be a big fat okay. People weren't really vibing with the story, especially the average TV show portions. I guess it's not as liked as I thought it was. There were criticisms of the gunplay and the variety of powers, and the latter I don't fully agree with, but either way, overall, most people did agree it's a decent play, but really not outstanding. That is not at all what Xbox wanted out of this game though. It was being marketed as the next big thing. I remember seeing trailers of this before it released and thinking, man, this is the first game that made me wish I had an Xbox. I didn't care much for Halo because it had already passed me by, but this was right up my alley, and then all of a sudden, it feel like it just dropped off the face of the earth months after release. Just look at the switch up with how Xbox talked about this game back in 2014 when they called it a new flagship franchise on the same level of importance as Halo and Gears of War, and August of 2016, just a couple of months after the game's release, where they claimed that the game had sold really well, even exceeded their expectations, but not every game needs a sequel, which is a weird way to talk about a game that you said was starting a franchise, is apparently making you more money than expected, and ended on a cliffhanger. How'd that conversation with Remedy go, you think? Hello?
Hello, this is Xbox.
Oh, thank God. I've been I've been waiting for your call, sir.
Yes, we wanted to discuss your sales with you. Quantum Break has performed admirably.
Really? That is amazing to hear. I was so worried. You said we'd be a franchise, and I've slept like 3 hours in the last 5 years. Oh my God, the team's gonna be so happy about this. This is
Yes, very nice, but about that franchise thing, see, we were thinking it could not be one, maybe.
What?
Yeah, see, I only told you that sales thing as a joke. We don't want to continue working on this property any longer.
Why would you do that to me?
Because I like to watch you suffer.
No, why? Why? Damn you, Aaron Greenberg!
I am not Aaron Greenberg.
Who then? Phil Spencer?
No, I'm Xbox.
Bill Gates?
No, fool. I am Xbox. You have disappointed me for the last time, bitch.
Wait, what the hell? Microsoft does own the Quantum Break IP, and that means that the two most important things about the game were always going to be its commercial success, and after that, its critical success. Remedy has shown a willingness to return to series that haven't necessarily sold out that well in the past, but Microsoft is less likely to do that, and I'm pretty sure that implies that the game might not have done as well as Microsoft said. The game did pre-order well, but follow-through seemed low. There were reports of low sales, even though Microsoft never went public with the numbers, which on its own is usually a bad sign. And the game's arrival on Steam shortly after saw a pretty low rate of players as well. There's also that fact I mentioned earlier that Remedy came out and said that Control was their most successful release since Max Payne, with about 2 million copies sold in its first 15 months, which implies Quantum Break underperformed that. And while Control did do well for how important Xbox was treating Quantum Break, that sub 2 million sales in 15 months isn't great. For reference, one of Sony's new IPs from the same generation, Ghost of Tsushima, sold 2.4 million copies in 3 days. Now in fairness, that was at the end of the console's life cycle, which means there were more adopters of the PS4 at the time, but 2017's Horizon Zero Dawn sold 2.6 million copies in 2 weeks, and that was just a year after Quantum Break, also a new IP. Even Bloodborne cracked 2 million in its first year despite coming out near the beginning of the PS4 era, being developed by a much less mainstream From Software and having the added hurdle of being ridiculously difficult to ward people off. The PlayStation 4 did vastly outsell the Xbox One in fairness, but there's not a lot of new Xbox IPs from the time to compare Quantum Break to, and you'd at least hope that one of your biggest hitters could match what Sony's doing in 1 to 2 weeks in 15 months. And to me, everything points to Quantum Break just being a bit disappointing sales-wise and certainly not having the long-term impacts it wanted, with almost no one bringing up the game today and player stats that can barely rival indie games that came out at the same time. After Xbox's recent restructuring and new leadership, I think any franchise can potentially make a comeback, so Quantum Break may just get the sequel that felt like a lock 6 years ago. Remedy's CEO even mentioned in 2018 that a sequel had been pitched and was awaiting approval, but with more time passing and Remedy having its hands full right now, I wonder if Microsoft will ever open that door again. The game didn't do gangbusters any way you slice it, even critically, and while I think it could be cool for Remedy to return to Quantum Break eventually after everything they learned about fluid combat and exciting powers from Control, I don't know if that's something that'll ever come to light. I'm curious to know what you guys think though. Are you a fan of Quantum Break? Do you think it's flawed, nothing special, or just downright bad? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, leave it a like. If you're new here, subscribe, and I'll see you all in a flash. Wait, no, Ezra, stop. No, I didn't mean it. No, please. Ah!